someone who has a dream but feels stuck, if you are facing obstacles that seem overwhelming, or if you just need a dose of motivation to keep pushing forward, then you are in the right place. So buckle up, dreamers. Anchor Your Dreams is not just a podcast, it's a community of dreamers supporting dreamers, women supporting women. Subscribe, follow along, and let's navigate the seas of ambition together. Thank you for joining me on this adventure. Get ready to be inspired, motivated, and empowered. The journey begins now. So before we get into your expertise, I'd love it if you can share more about what your journey has been like to get to where you are now, today. Has there been any roadblocks, mental barriers at the start of your journey?
Yes. Gone through a fair amount of health challenges in my day that actually led me to wanting to be in the line of work I am. To begin with, when I was scheduled to go to massage therapy school. That was the beginning of my educational journey. And I actually was dealing at the time with a very rare and unusual form of psoriasis called pustular psoriasis that came with a lot of nerve pain. And unfortunately, in my case, it was on the base of my foot. So I couldn't walk for almost 6 months, 4 months. I ended up getting a very fun rig that actually had my leg not weight bearing, so I could move around, but it was huge. Like, I'd been saving for massage school for years and was all set to go, and then was very cut down from this inability to walk. And it's autoimmune psoriasis. So when you're intellectualizing that and realizing it's your own body attacking yourself, and I have another one, vitiligo, which is a pigment where your body stops producing pigment in certain areas of your body. I'm very lucky in my case. It's just here, it's symmetrical. It's not that noticeable unless I'm very tan and then it kind of glows, but it almost looks like makeup highlighter. So, and I'm blessed in that it hasn't grown. So when I developed psoriasis, that's the second, I was like, oh my gosh, my body is taking itself down. So that was a huge journey in like healing my gut, healing my emotional system to realize why that was happening, dealing with a lot of family trauma. And was eventually able to go to massage school not too long later. I just had to defer basically a semester. So instead of starting in January, I started in September. But so that was great. Yeah, coming in with a whole new sense of gratitude for my ability to move.
The way that you started your journey into even the health, going through your own experience with yourself, I could only imagine what that felt like to then be taking some education to turn around and help others, and taking your life experience that you just went through going into that.
It was really helpful. And in my case, it was not the first chapter of that injury story. I had broken my tailbone as a 16-year-old, jumping off a very high cliff into water. I had injured it in the past, snowboarding and falling on ice, so I was in pain for 5 years with that. And like, that was kind of the beginning of the health journey, when I guess I needed a few to really learn the lesson and build the empathy for my clients now as well.
Oh, wow. What a great way to frame it, as well as taking something that you've experienced, which brought you pain and a lot of years of dealing with things. I could only imagine, not just physically, but mentally as well. And taking that and seeing that that was enabling you to bring empathy into your practice and journey of working in the health and working with other people as well.
Absolutely. I think it's really hard to intellectualize chronic pain until you've experienced it. Like the neurological grading that happens from pain that keeps on going and keeps on going. And even being a person who's not suffering with it now, I forget. Like, your body wants to forget. I have to like get in touch with that sometimes when I'm supporting others. Being like, yeah. And people have a short attention span for your pain. Like, people are very supportive for whatever it would be, 2 weeks, 2 months,
Mhm.
even the people we love, but we'll move on, right? As they should, right? They have their own stuff going on, but
So very true. And I've gone through my own journey with pain as
okay.
well as I would seem like a barely at all offender bend, like nothing to them, but I was dealing with so much back pain and it took years. And even to this day, I can do something and then days later, where is that coming from? What did I do? And that is often the question that I end up asking myself. It's not like what happened, it's what did I do to bring the pain back. So and I can relate to also the people around us. They move on, they want to move on. They don't like seeing, a lot of people that care about us as well don't like seeing us in pain. It makes them uncomfortable and they want just as much for it to be fixed for you, but also for them too.
It's true. It's so true. One of my dearest friends has been suffering with multiple concussions over the last 10 years. And like, I find myself kind of moving on from her pain, and it breaks my heart to say that because I love her so much, but like, I forget. And it's a year, especially with head injuries, like it's years and it's hidden. And
Yeah.
I remember. Like, keep supporting her where she's at and like don't move on from it. Just
well, and that's the thing, we're all human and we do things not just because of the way that we were raised or anything like that, but we do choose to do things because of what we also ourselves need in those present moments as well. I could imagine that a lot of times when other people are in pain, it can be triggering as well. We might not feel it or like know that that's where it's coming from, but just something to also remember. For myself, that's something that I have to remember when other people hurt their back or say that their back hurts. Sometimes it can be a little bit triggering.
right, of course. And sometimes we get our little should hats on, right? But are you doing this and are you doing that well enough for my desires?
Yeah, those should.
Who the hell are we to like project that on them?
Yes, exactly. So it sounds like you have had some barriers and some roadblocks. Now, you started going to school, and what did that look like for you as far as getting into self-employment?
Well, so I finished massage school, and what's really wonderful about massage school in our province is they're so prepared. Like, they just set you up so well for not just conditions and dealing with everything in that regard, but also understanding the business side and understanding basically how to navigate. So I felt very supported in that way. Another roadblock that I hit, and this is kind of a interesting element that's unusual, is right after I finished massage school, while I was waiting to write board exams, I got bit by a rattlesnake. Yeah, which for everybody, there's no rattlesnakes on the island. They're in the Okanagan and they're in Kamloops.
Is that where it happened?
Yes.
Okay, so.
And I was told by poison control, it's about 1 person a year in the province. It's extremely rare. So it's not a reason to be scared of the Okanagan or to feel like one needs to be prepared for that. It's just a freak thing to happen. So I know that that causes a very visceral fear for some people when they hear that. But it's super rare.
So this happened right before your exams.
Yeah.
So before your exams.
Which are notoriously quite known to be challenging, those exams as well. Like there's a decent fail rate.
Wow. So how did you come back from that happening and getting to writing your exams and finishing, like actually getting through everything?
Yeah, it was pretty bad. I was in the ICU for 5 days. They almost they talked about amputating my foot. The big vein, the big artery in our leg, the femoral artery, the femoral vein got quite significantly burnt down, so thin and friable. So it was a whole process. Like the size of my leg was inches smaller than my other leg for a time, just with atrophy from that injury. And what I didn't know at the time, and my loved ones kept from me, was that I was actually not always speaking correctly, and I was having like neurological fogginess, not to the degree of like I could obviously communicate and speak, but there was just a little bit of gaps happening, which is not great when you have to write a complicated scientific test. Yeah, I mean, I took lots of supplements and tried to support myself the best I could. I had a really supportive partner.
And this was after you came out of the hospital. This is what they were noticing. Was it shared with you that this could be it?
It didn't. I mean, no one wanted to scare me for my tests. So people kind of told me after that, like, oh yeah, some of you, what you were saying was nonsensical.
So you did your test.
I did my tests.
Yeah. I want to back up here a second because I think this is an important thing. You were going through some stuff. This is exams that has a high fail rate. You yourself are not at your optimum health.
No.
And then you did these exams.
4 of them.
4 exams.
Yeah.
Okay. And how did you do?
Well, I passed them. Okay. 2 of them you get results, 2 of you don't. You just get a pass or fail. I mean, I passed them. So yeah. It was funny when I went to do my scientific written, which was actually with my whole class. One of my classmates had a rattlesnake t-shirt. Not on purpose. I mean, obviously my classmates do, but it had slightly smaller.
Right.
It was funny, but yeah.
Well, you had a good laugh. Well,
it was funny, yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's incredible. Were you, so after everyone was telling you about that, how did that make you feel looking back at doing the exams?
Well, I feel very proud of myself for having successfully done them. I also, I remember because I had been on a walk when this happened, and I remember on the walk out thinking about boards, because that's all I was doing at the time, was thinking about boards, and it really actually trivialized them in a nice way. Because when I was in it, massage school, you kind of live and breathe it. It's really kind of intense program. So it was like, okay, it doesn't actually really matter. If I fail these and I write them in 6 months, what? So it kind of took the pressure off me a little bit, which was good. I also had a damn good excuse for failing if I had, right? So yeah. I think that helped actually my mental health at the time of just knowing it's okay and it's not really a reflection of myself if I don't pass this, because before that it would have been a giant ego hit if that had.
I like this where this is going, because I think that when we put so much pressure on ourselves like that, and we start to put our worth in these, whether it's an education piece and everything, even if it's something that we're passionate about and we know that we're doing it because we're following our heart, that other sort of pressure that we put on ourselves is often related to something societal or familial. And you came to a place where you were able to release that pressure and you still were able to make it through that.
Yeah.
And pass.
Yeah.
And do the thing that you set out to do, even without all of that extra pressure on yourself. And there's a word that I think of when you were saying that, and it's surrender.
It was. It really was.
Surrendering not just to yourself, but also just to the outcome, like detaching and just surrendering to whatever was going to happen for you in that moment in time in your life. Was just, you're going to let it happen and see what was going to come of it later and make some choices after.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful way to even sit with things, I think, personally. My experience in life, whenever I've allowed myself to surrender, so much other things come and just open up. It's like it's almost like an opening, like you're surrendering to something, but the way that I even visualize it, it's like the heart just opens to so much more.
Yeah. The older I get, the more just where can I soften? Where, I mean, I would use the soften instead of surrender, but I like surrender too. And they clearly hand in hand. It's like, where can we surrender and soften? And my brother recently has graduated from massage school and done his sports, and I was helping him study recently. And it was interesting to see my process through it and just how much I was like, please just take time for yourself and like be grounded and be soft and like it's not the grind. Like sometimes it's the grind, but
Right.
but
Definitely sometimes it's the grind. Now, going back, like talking about that, you were saying that the schooling and everything, they're really good at helping you set up, not just for the health and wellness in massage, but also the business side of things.
Yes.
So going to that word grinding, did you feel like did you start your own practice like right after, or did you work for somebody? What did you do as far as that journey for self-employment and tying in the word grinding and hustling? Did you start to feel like you had to do that to gain clients?
I started working at a massage therapy clinic in the Valley shortly after I had finished and gotten my board results. So I had a wonderful woman who I rented space from, who was very much a mentor and very much was there to answer all the questions. And it wasn't a lot of a grind for me. I started work at a good time, which was the beginning of December. And we tend to, in all of these disciplines like massage and physio and chiro, be extremely busy in that time. People are trying to get the last of their benefits in. It's just common that you're kind of packed November, December. So it was a good time to begin because so many people are just trying to find a slot. So I was lucky in that was the timing lined up. The woman I worked for happened to have more clients than she could work with. So she was able to hand off to me. So it was a fairly gentle process that happened for me in that way. And then COVID hit. So I've been working, the December until March 16th when we shut
everything closed down.
Yeah.
Wow. So what did that look like for you to transition? Did you have to just stop?
We had to stop. Yeah. So when the whole world stopped, whatever that was, 10 weeks, I think, we were kind of in the first line of allowed to come back. So I think it was 10 weeks, but you didn't know, right? We didn't know it was going to be 10 weeks when that started. And obviously social distancing is not something that was doable in this line of work, completely opposite. It was a lot when we came back. Like, there had been people who had not been around anybody for that 10 weeks, and we were kind of the first line of reconnection. So the emotional load of that was significant space for those people, and the fear that they had in even coming, but needing to come, and all of that. Super grateful that I got to be one of the first lines back.
And I could just imagine, like, you having gone through things yourself, creating this very safe space for these people to come back into, having, the empathy that you've gained through all your own experiences and going through things and feeling scared along the way yourself through different times, that also just played a huge role in people coming back and you opening back up your practice for doing what you love to do and what you're passionate about. So what did it look like then when you came back? Did a lot of the same clients, were you reaching out? Did you feel like you had to reach out to people, or people were just slowly trickling back in?
I mean, we had sent out a mass information to the client load, like from the clinic that I worked at. Some didn't come back for a while, mostly people who were compromised in some way, who didn't feel like that was a safe choice for them. I wouldn't say that was a huge number. Most people were pretty desperate to come back at that point. I mean, that was before we were wearing masks and things like that as well. We still don't know exactly the mechanism of that virus. Yeah, it was fairly seamless. I mean, work was a little slower through that time, but we also just needed each other. And I think people coming to a safe place where they knew that all of us were taking our health seriously and their health seriously in whatever form that was. But so it was a safe place. People could come and feel connection and feel touch. And so I was very honored.
And on the self-employment side of things, it sounds like you also had great support with your mentor. And how did that help you, having that support sort of in-house, getting through all of these things?
I experienced that a few times. When I was younger, I was what kind of got me really seeing that this was the line of work for me was I was a receptionist at a wellness clinic in Vancouver. And I got to kind of know all the modalities. I got to see how the acupuncturists work and the naturopaths and the massage therapists and see their day-to-day. And the woman who ran that clinic was incredible. And I was young at the time, I was 19, and I just remember watching her. You when I grow up. So I had her, and then I had the next woman I worked for, and all of these women were just so supportive, so giving. It was never about you're working for me and these are my clients. It was always you do what's right for you. If you want to leave, you bring your clients. We're all going to support each other. And it really showed me that that's who I would want to be in the future as well. It's like we can lift each other up. It's not about the neediness or like stickiness, which I get to. We get into our fear and we get into our, I'm really grateful I was mirrored that from some really incredible women.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is like, that's part of the reason why I also wanted to do this podcast and why I came to this realization just last fall that this is what I had to do. This is where I had to direct my energy, because with all the social media sense of competing, and not just in a sense, like not in the same industry, someone competing with somebody else, but competing for people's attention, competing in a space where connections are just based on a few second reel. So for me, what I wanted to do was bring a deeper level through conversation and hearing people's stories, because I think that's such an important piece that people miss out on through social media. And as much as we have websites and we put all of our about us on websites, so many people are still looking at social media as like, where can I find this person? Where can, if I need a massage therapist, okay, I'll look on Instagram, or I'll look over here and see what might come up for me. Unless of course there's referrals that are being given in person. So for me, it was a way to connect people together, like creating a network of people that are all different and yet still the same, because we're heart-centered. So that's what brought me to doing the podcast, and why I'm so glad to sit here across from you and listen to everything that you're saying, and seeing that you had support throughout and people to look up to that aligned with you, and you realized that that's exactly how you wanted to be as well. So I think that it's a lot of people really do feel with their heart first when they're going through different paths in their life and connect to a place. But the reflection that you've had as well about going back and when you were 19 and being able to see that that's who you wanted to be, and here you are showing up as that person. What tips can you share with the listeners for staying motivated during some of those challenging times?
I've always lent on my community. I've always prioritized my gals and lifting each other up and having those people that you can call and who's going to support you and who's going to remind you of your fire and your light. So I've been blessed with that. And I think just remaining flexible. Like, the world changes. How can I change and meet it now? Like, I know I have to like stop myself from taking too much school. I'm allowed 2 courses at once now. And and just knowing that I've got different things going on. Like, have multiple avenues of things you love. Delve into more than one thing. That's always kind of been something I've seen where, okay, maybe something's not working out, or you messed up your foot and you can't walk. What else do you have? I know I have gone through huge issues of who am I if I'm not able to do this? Who am I if I can't provide this to other people? So really kind of having multiple streams, that is huge. I mean, for me, it's also just spending time with visualization for what I do want. And over the last little while, I've really been feeling into meditation styles, kind of like Joe Dispenza, if you're familiar with that. But that would be kind of visualizing what you want, but getting into the emotional vibration of that feeling. So say it's X amount of money in your bank account, or this physical feat, or a busy clinic. Getting myself into that thought pattern and feeling the feelings like I'm already there. And that's been just huge for me. For actually, I'm like, okay, that's what it feels like. Let me get myself aligned and vibrating with that. And then it just comes. So that's been a real delving in for me over the last little while. Harnessing our power a little more too. But yeah, I think being flexible, not being set on it needing to go one way.
Yes, I think that's a huge challenge for a lot of people, is learning to let go of sort of this rigid thinking, patterns of rigid thinking, into more flexible thinking. And again, it goes back to, you know, sometimes the way that we've grown up, or having to survive ourselves through a lot of different challenges, that we do lean on very structured, rigid thinking to get us through those challenging times. So opening things up. And I think it sounds amazing, just even how you were sitting there and allowing yourself to even feel those feelings and express and allow your body to move in the moment as you're talking about it. I can just see that is such a wonderful way to relax and release. And when you're talking about feelings as well, like getting into the emotion of it, we have so many senses that I think are so important to pick up on as well when we're visualizing things. And that, for me, when I think of the visualizations and setting goals, things like that, using all, like trying to tap into all the different senses that we have of what that looks like, is such a powerful way. Because as soon as we're walking down the road and we might smell a smell that came to us during that visualization, it brings us to that place.
It does.
And then it's another like anchoring point to getting to that goal or that visualizing level that you wanted to get to as well.
Yeah. Well, something that keeps running through my head as you're speaking is, I've been educated recently from some of the incredible women in this community about the sister roots that we all have, and what kind of historical patterns have led us to kind of the competition you were speaking of, that, and a little bit more educated on things like the witch trials and the burnings, and our history of being pitted against each other and competing for men and competing for status. Like, can you imagine, like, the witch trials and you're a herbalist, or your neighbor is, and to save yourself, you're turning her in, and like what kind of neurological imprint that does on our DNA. And something I wasn't aware of was how recent those were. And I think for a lot of us, we think that was 500-600 years ago, and that is just not true. And I love when you were just speaking about your vision for the podcast, and even when I heard your message in your trailer about it, I was like, yes, here's a sister who's working on it and raising us up, because we all have it. We all have these elements of competition and fear and insecurity around each other, and that we're actually like breaking through it, and through celebrating each other's power, we get to heal that. Yes. And then our daughters and their daughters aren't going to have it quite as much.
I have 2 daughters.
Okay.
And that is definitely one of the driving forces as well for me. It's wanting to model to them as well that we can continue to be kind, be generous, show up who we are, and not change who we are just to make ourselves positioned so that we're more likable by all this, like a specific group or clique or something. You know, they're in school, so I'm hearing about it. And it's really it really needs to happen more, where women are supporting women. And it does go back really quite far. There's the sister wound, there's also the mother wound.
Sure.
And that's like a whole other topic
It is.
that you really get into. But one of the things that also, when you were talking about the witch trials and everything, our intuition as women, I feel like we have been made to believe that we're wrong in our intuition, because if something health-wise is not going the way that it needs to, and we turn to trying different remedies, but to the world, those are not right because of, for instance, it being a witchy thing to do,
Yeah,
or a new age thing to do, that then it's not correct, it's not right, it's not the path that you should try to follow, and avoid that but stay over here. But if there's this deep intuition that you have to follow that, and people are trying to tell you that you're wrong, it takes us completely off a path, and we start not trusting ourselves. And when we don't trust ourselves and don't show up because we don't trust ourselves, then we start questioning everything around us, and questioning people's intentions, and why they're doing what they're doing, or why they're saying, and it's all based on things that aren't true anyways. And we really just need to follow what's in our heart and in our intuition, and allow that to guide us. I keep looking across the room and seeing that peak through the triangle, and it brings me to this quote that I'm a big quote person. I love quotes, and of course we all interpret them differently. The quote is about how a peak or a summit is not going to come down to our level. We have to go up to view from the summit. And to get there, we do really need to follow our heart. It might take way longer than another person, but as long as we're patient and following that intuition, and maybe we'll take, a detour, but we probably will come back, as long as we stay in our knowing and that intuition and get to that summit. And having people along the way, right? Like that to me, that's a huge thing. We're not meant to do this alone.
No.
We're not meant to raise a family alone. We're not meant to become adult women alone. We're not meant to go through all the stages of becoming an adult alone. And we're not meant to grow old alone either. So this is another part of why I'm doing the podcast, is because I want people to feel seen. I want people to know that they are acknowledged in this world, that they mean something, and they're very much a part of something bigger. It's just sometimes we need to be reminded that there is so much more.
Yeah.
What has been one of the most surprising connections you've made on your journey?
Connections.
Like, is there somebody that you've met in the workplace, or perhaps somebody that you've connected with that maybe surprised you, that you made a deep connection with, or anything like that?
I started working with a woman, Jacqueline is her name, who came to me first as a client, and she's an incredible hypnotherapist in the Valley, by the way. And we started working together, and through her, she led me to this amazing woman, Laura, who's my personal trainer, actually. And when you hear personal trainer, there's a certain idea of what that is, but this woman is like teaching you how to move, and teaching you how your body needs to be supported through movement, which is just so my cup of tea. And through that, Jacqueline now holds amazing women's circles here in this environment. And I work with Laura, and I work with a lot of Laura's clients. So having this working relationship where I'm working with their musculoskeletal system and their neurological health, and then sending them to have movement, and then the conversations we get to have through that. So again, it's coming back to working together and having these amazing people around us and how influencing that is. And I don't know if that's a surprising connection, but that kind of trickle of these women in that community, through them, I also met this incredible woman, Yvonne, who's actually just started working here as a women's coach. So just kind of the trickle effect that can happen from that. And then we look around and like, wow, there's these amazing pillars from our community that are all working together. And that is just making my heart sing.
It's the collaborating.
Yeah,
right.
the collaborating.
Yeah.
And I think the older I get, the more I value that. Like if I would have imagined at 20 where I wanted to be, it would be very much like me and what I'm creating. And that is still true, but now it's like, who's with me, who's around? And that's exciting. That's a cool thing with age, of kind of softening to it needing to be so much about you.
Yes.
So I can only imagine what it's like when, you know, if one's blessed to have 60 and 70 and 80 experiences, and what that must be like. I can see why people want to mentor, right? Because when you're older and you've succeeded, that's kind of what there is left, right? Like, who do we pull up with us?
Yes. And mentorship, I mean, it could just be that I haven't seen it as much myself, but mentorship is such a wonderful way to encourage people as well, and bring them into that path that you can see that they really want to take, but they're having a hard time.
Right.
Understanding that they are worthy and that they have what it takes to go there.
Yeah.
Because they've gone through all the things. They've seen the different things happen. They've gone through the different relationships that maybe didn't go as well, working relationships or anything like that, or they've gone through other very big transformations in their lives, and they've gotten to the level that they're at. And it's like, people get excited to share everything. And that's where I also feel like, if we're excited to share, if that really does excite us, again, that points to, we are not meant to do this alone.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's just continue to share, and share the knowledge, but also the energy. For me, that's another thing that I've realized over the years as well, is that when you're with people, the energy can be shared. And I went to a women's conference in October, and the energy was like so incredible that I came home and I just was still like on this energetic high, that I just was like, I need to share this. I need to share this with so many people, because I've got this shared energy. Everybody was sharing it. And I wanted to share it with other people as well. People that weren't necessarily at the conference, my friends who are going through things because they're trying to start businesses, or they just, you know, I wanted to share that energy with them and be like, come borrow some of this energy from me. And then you too can take it and start finding yourself gaining more energy, like compounding. Energy compounds.
Exactly. Instead of me plus you plus, it's me times you, times.
That formula, exactly. Instead of plus, it's multiplied.
Yeah.
Yes. Is there any other points that you would really like to talk about, as far as what it's like to bring your dreams and visions into reality?
Yeah. So yes, so at some point along that journey of working in the clinic, I moved to working out of my home, which was actually very lovely through the thick of COVID. I was very in control of there not being huge numbers coming in and out. I was very lucky in that I lived in a home that had an exterior door with an ensuite. So I was able to, you know, not have everyone tracking through my space and it being kind of a closed container. So that was kind of my first baby step into working on my own, which was really lovely. So from this supportive environment in the community to moving there, I did that for about a year, and that was great. And then I ended up living in with my partner, and it just wasn't a realistic choice for me to continue to be working out of my home. We have 2 dogs and work different schedules, and it would have been loud and rambunctious and not peaceful. I started getting on the hunt for looking for a commercial lease, which was long and arduous and difficult because there's lots of options for very large spaces, or it would have required quite a lot of renovations. Mainly, like, what I absolutely need for my work is laundry. I mean, I guess you could do it at home, but I don't want to. It was a process, and I had a few that I got close to with signing contracts, and for various reasons, things fell through, and it kind of was going on and on. And then I found this place, which I had not thought I was going to not work in Courtney. I live in Oyster River, so I'm already about 25 minutes out of town. So I just figured I was going to be commuting. Hadn't crossed my mind that I would find a happy medium between my home and town. And it was quite an act of courage for me to ask of my clients to drive out of town.
Okay. I'd like to come back to this.
Yeah, which is funny because it's not that far. Like, it's 10-15 minutes depending on where you are, but when you want things to be easy and convenient, you don't know how that's going to go. And I have more expenses here than I did, obviously, when I was renting and living in my space. And so I needed to be having X amount of work to maintain. It was a process, and an act of courage on my part of just sinking into that. And to go back, I did a lot of visualizing on how that would go, and like actually seeing the beautiful people I wanted to work with coming, and that feeling of abundance. And man, am I glad I did, because it's been amazing here, and people love coming. We're surrounded by trees and in the woods. I've had people think it's kind of like a treehouse in here. It's the second story up and very grounded in earth and wood, and people will just come early and sit here and have tea or stay and stretch after their sessions, or it just feels so special that it's a place that people feel safe and want to be. And business has been incredible, and of course some clients fell off who, that commute mattered to them, and man, has the Merville Black Creek community raised up, and grateful about having something out here. It's quite a burgeoning community, and I'm sure we'll see over the next number of years other amazing businesses and people doing things out here, because we need it.
It's growing.
It's growing.
It's growing so much.
Yeah.
I think that fear of, will people drive or come to you when you've made it easy for them? That's such a hard thing sometimes. I think it's more, for me, a fear, not so much a fear. It's like, okay, well, if they don't, then that means more time needs to be put into building it. And so there's that going back to being flexible again.
Yes.
And so there's, you know what I mean? Like, it's like a fear of the unknown, because you don't know who's going to come with you until maybe you start actually, open sign is on the door, and who actually is going to show up. So you really don't know what is needed of you, is sort of in the business sense of things, until you start seeing the schedule.
Yeah.
So what does that feel like to sit in that transition of people coming, and like you said, your expenses increased.
Yeah.
And you went from working from home and then finding a place to lease. How did you work through all of that? Did you use a lot of the meditation and visualizing to get you through that? Do you have other people you use on your team to help you get to those figures that you're needing to make sure that you're covering not just your overhead, but also your own, putting food on your own plate.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely employed those strategies. I have also an incredible, I guess she's like a hybrid therapist, energy worker that I'm very diligent about working with. Like every 2 to 3 weeks for years, I work with her, and that really helps. So when I'm in kind of those moments of anxiety or things, I just kind of ask of her for more extra support, and so that was really helpful. I have an incredible partner too that is like, we will be okay. Like if if things are a little slow, we will be okay. Like, and family members and everyone kind of stood up and said that for me. So I feel very lucky in that regard. And what's actually ended up happening is, I feel so happy to say this, my mom and my brother both work here. So I've not only kind of created the space for myself, but for my family. And I just feel, every time I get to say that, I just feel so honoring that, one, they want to, two, I can. And I know when people come in and they see like the Jane app with all the Winfeld names, they're like, what's happening here? So that's really cool. My brother's new, like he's a new RMT just starting to work here. And it's very cool to like be working in my room and hear him with his clients, and the feedback I've heard from his clients is incredible. He was a personal trainer and done a lot of other courses before doing RMT, so he has a unique offer. And yeah, just, it's so cool.
Oh, that is so cool. That is really neat. And again, it's like doing things together. Yeah. And for some people, it is doing things with family. Maybe their partners, and for some people it's parents, siblings, and for other people it's just finding people very close in their circle, and that's okay too.
That is okay too.
Yeah, I love that. What are some tips that everyone can do at home with like what they have to sort of steer them to optimizing their health?
So first I'll just preface with, we've been talking about that I'm an RMT, but I'm also an osteo and have done that education, and I'm trained in Reiki and have done some training in Qigong, which is ancient Chinese medicine. And currently I'm doing a health coaching program. So I have a little bit of fingers in a few pies. I just wanted to preface that I'm an RMT, but there's add-ons to that as well.
Yes.
I mean, to go to your question, you were asking about what can people do themselves for their own health?
Yeah. And like what would be maybe some underrated things that people can do for themselves at home to either, before they get to that place where they're feeling that something has to give, something has to change? What could they start doing now? Is it stretching in the mornings? Is it something to do with the mentality even? Is it a morning visualization, or what do you think that they could do at home?
Well, I think for most of us, it's going to be having some kind of established routine in our morning. And that does not look the same for all of us. I think ideally it's going to incorporate movement. And I say movement, not exercise on purpose. Joyful movement, whatever that is for you. If it's stretching, great. If it's lifting up something heavy, great. If it's walking outside, great. Especially with walking outside, there's really a lot of power for having correct hormone balance with having first sunlight in the morning. Now, it doesn't have to be literal first sunlight, but like getting out in the early part of our day, having sun on our face, we get a lot of the power through our eyes. So encouraging you not to have sunglasses or things like this, but letting light stream into us. It actually elicits correct. And there she is, just in a sunbeam, being glorious. It actually makes for correct cortisol spikes throughout our day. So one, it's having a more stable mood, but two, it's allowing sleep hormones in the night to come at a correct time. So we're not spiking incorrectly. For so much of us, we have disturbances with our sleep, and that might not be something as extreme as insomnia, and maybe we're falling asleep fine, but we know when we look at people's tests that their quality of sleep is just not good. And that is for a lot of reasons. I do think light exposure is one of the biggest. I did a lot of experimenting for a while with an Aura ring, which is like the watches people wear that monitor your sleep quality, but it's basically just a ring version of that. And figuring out, okay, is it the sugar at night that's affecting my sleep? Is it heat? Is it, and it was light. And for so much of us, we're on our devices at night, on our phones at night, we're watching movies at night, and that's all great. But we're letting light come into our body at a time where our body is expecting it to be dark, and it's actually creating awake hormones. Yeah.
I don't hang out on my phone at night.
No one does. But it's really, I mean, obviously all of us are going to have different things that affect it, right? So for some people, maybe it is their big, secret sugar at night that's affecting their sleep.
Right.
That does, for sure.
Yeah.
But light is really powerful. I've heard it said once, we should be trying to get outside 4 times throughout the day at different times to actually connect with the sun and the different phases. Again, all for our hormone. It doesn't even have to be out there for long periods of time, but 5-10 minutes at 4 different segments of the day. It's kind of like how you would reground if you flew in a plane to the other side of the world. Yeah.
It's really fascinating. So interesting. My daughter wears glasses, and she was complaining about her eyes one day. This sort of leading into the next thing. So my dad, we were talking this one day, and he's like, oh, he watched something, and it was talking about before, like all the digital age of light, our eyes didn't have to adjust constantly to the to the light itself. We would be outside and it would be like really bright, and if a cloud came over, it was like, okay, the cloud came over, but it wasn't this very fast change in light. It was kind of like a little bit slower. So our eyes are getting so tired, and yet, like what you're saying about being out in the sun at different stages of the day and everything, it just made me think of at nighttime when we do have our screens. I'm one of those people, I do turn the screen brightness like way down, and I also have like the warm light look to my screen.
Yeah.
At the same time, our eyes are constantly looking at different things and having to sort of go into our brains to say what we're taking in, whether it's the light, the change in depth, or anything like that. So I think it just really kind of piqued my interest, and I'm now fascinated with this whole get outside, a few times at different times a day to connect everything. It makes sense to me.
And even you saying the depth, like you think about how often we're looking closely, right? And if you think about a muscle, like if I constantly hold my arm up, I'm holding into a flexed position, that muscle eventually is used to being in a shortened position, and it's less happy to be long. This is the classic, all of us have rolled forward shoulders. You, me, all of us have rolled forward shoulders. And that's because we are so continuously in that position that over time, those muscles are used to approximating. There's always another muscular group that is now lengthened, and that tends to be the muscles between our shoulder blades and spine. And that happens with our eyes as well. So if you think about you're always looking closely, the muscle starts to be short. It starts to be stuck into that position. And we don't look far away. We don't. There's really cool eye exercises where you're looking far at the mountain and you're jumping close, and then you're going to the tree 100 yards away, and then you're jumping close, and actually exercising your eyes the way that you would any part of your body. Think how many of us need reading glasses, right? So our body just over time is adjusting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So interesting. So fascinating.
So to back to what you said, I think having an established morning routine that has some form of movement, some form of joy, and some form of learning. So not rushing into our day, not hitting that snooze button.
Soft
5 more times.
start
A soft
is what
start.
we call it.
Now, I will say, if your soft start is jumping up and dunking in the river and doing a strength, that's okay if that's your soft start. I
Yes.
just don't mean it's going to be, you know, rushing down coffee, running out. Take that 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be long. Go for a 10-minute walk. Maybe you're listening to an educational podcast. Maybe you come home and drink your coffee and read a book about something that's interesting you. But to establish something that we've done for ourselves in the morning, we've already progressed, is just setting up our day for success. And I really think it can be simple. And I know for myself, sometimes I have to really humble myself down. It's not going to yoga 4 days a week. It's doing one 20-minute yoga video on Saturdays, and then you succeed at that. But sometimes I know for myself, again, I, want to do all this stuff and want to hit it all. It's like, okay, no, I'm not doing that, or I'm going to get burnt out. So it's really dialing it back. Let yourself succeed. Let yourself be excited. And then maybe add another thing. But yeah. And then I'm always going to add water.
Right. Yes.
And I would encourage people to think about the quality of their water as well. We all do our best. Tap water has a myriad of issues, including it's unstructured water, like the actual molecules of the water. It often has people's medications in it. Yeah. And it's usually been treated with something like chlorine, which is negatively affecting our microbiome and a myriad of other things. So just having, and again, that can be different things. Maybe it's well water, maybe it's reverse osmosis water from the grocery store. I myself am very into hunting for springs and collecting that, because to me, that's the most powerful. You don't have to do that. That's an extreme choice. If you're inclined, it's a really exciting thing to do. It's a finding treasure. But
I'd like to hear more about this too. That sounds fun.
Yeah, there's a website called findaspring.com. I don't know if you have show notes or things on the podcast, but that could link it. Yeah. And it actually shows springs all over the world. You can go onto it and say you're going to Kelowna, and you can look up cool springs to find, both cold springs and hot springs, and kind of add that as a fun little scavenger hunt. It's really fun to do with kids as well.
I have a water baby.
Okay.
Loves all things water. So
okay. And what a great thing to have kids get excited about, like the quality of their water. It's the easiest, cheapest thing we can do for our health.
Water it's interesting because we have a well.
Yeah.
And when we moved into our place, we live on the same property my husband grew up on. His grandparents bought the property in the 70s. He was raised by his grandparents. And there's a well, right, that they had been drinking for however many years, probably never even thought about the quality of the water in the well. When we moved onto the property and built our place, of course, now, lenders don't want to lend if there's a risk to the potability of water. So you have to provide water tests and certifications. So because of that, I had to get our water tested. Yeah, got our water tested, not good water. So we did the shock the well with the bleach and do all this kind of stuff, still came back not good.
And was it not good because it was high mineral?
No, it was high E. coli. I'm pretty sure it's either that. It's like an animal. What we suspect is it's because there's farmland behind us.
Okay. Yeah, I'm forgetting what that term is called as well.
It was on the paperwork and it just said this is, and so we were encouraged to put in a UV system. So that's how we treat our water, is through a UV system. So our water gets pumped out of our well into our house. It goes through a UV light and then we can drink it. We don't have to add anything.
And that's incredible. And talk about technology doing something.
And our kids love our water. They prefer our water from home over the water at school. Yeah. So if I don't fill their water bottle all the way to the top, they're complaining at the end of the day, I had to drink school water.
And how cool, hey? They've developed their water palette as well, where they can tell the difference.
Yeah.
there's differences between water. There's actual water sommeliers out there, like there'd be wine sommeliers. You can go places and be like, here's this mineral water, and here's the. I've not had the pleasure yet. I think that would be fun.
Well,
Yeah.
well, and that's the thing, not everybody can pick up the different tastes in the
No.
water. I myself can. So I totally understand my kids being able to as well. My dad, however, he would tell me, it's all comes from the same tap. It's all the same. How can you tell? Never understood that I could actually tell the difference between the water I was drinking at his house, the water in town, because it was different as well. The water at my mom's house and the water at his house was very different tasting.
Yeah.
But
And often people will then next say, I'm just grateful that we have healthy water. And so am I. So am I. And just because maybe we're more fortunate than other people in the world doesn't mean we can't also make a slightly better choice as well. So,
yeah,
I mean, this place has well water, and I actually tend to bottle water here and bring it to my home as well when I'm not able to go to the spring. How I heard it once said, which I just thought was so beautiful, is that the difference between well water and spring water is spring water, the earth has now ripened and is giving it to you. As well water, still amazing, definitely the second best choice if it's healthy. Obviously, if you're drinking some kind of contaminated water, we need to get that treated. But the idea that it's ripened it like fruit and it's like a juicy strawberry, just every time I'm like filling up my jugs and yeah, this is something the earth's gifting us.
yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Oh, as soon as you said that, I just pictured a stream and just it looking so drinkable.
Yes.
Kind of like, the same when the water is clear at the ocean and just like even on a super cold day. I'm not a cold plunger. I want to, but there's days where I've taken my dog for a walk and the water just looks so inviting. It just makes me want to step in it with all of my clothes on. Like,
Just your goddess walk.
yeah, they're like, usually the sun is also shining at the same time when that happens. Water, the earth, sun, all these elements.
Mhm.
I'm having a whole other thought process in my mind right now about all these different things. You've given us some tips, so that's wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I do think that like a routine,
Yeah,
a ritual. I love that word ritual because it brings a sense of like choice into what you're doing in the morning. Routine sounds a little more mundane and like you have to do it, but needless to say, that's what we need.
Sometimes we need it to be a ritual, right?
What are some of your personal favorite services? Either because you're in the health and you are massage, do you have a personal favorite massage technique that you like to use, or is there another service that you like that's one of your personal favorites?
I work a lot with the fascial network of the body. So if I had to say that if I lean into one way of treating, that would be it. I do a lot of work with organ manipulation and neurological support and joint mobilizations as well. To me, the fascial network is all of those things. So, and for people who are not familiar with fascia is the connective tissue that runs in and around all of the compartments of our body. It's below our skin. It surrounds each muscle. It surrounds each organ. It doesn't just surround, it embeds. So I like to talk about muscles, like if you imagine a package of hot dogs, and each hot dog has plastic, and then the hot dog package has plastic around, and then maybe there's 10 packages with plastic around it. That's the fascia into the muscle fibers. So we work with the outer, but it's also working with the inner. And again, that's also surrounding the organs. It's covering our bones. It's this whole beautiful gelatinous network that basically holds our body up. And it is what our nerves and our blood vessels run in. So to come back to water, if we're dehydrated, the fascial network becomes like jerky. So she's sipping water. So basically, it starts to inhibit the neurological firing, the blood flow, and not to the point where your arm's dead or tingling, but it just starts to be reduced. We get a little bit less recovery when oxygenated blood is not coming to those areas. And over time, this creates dysfunction. Think about people who have numbness in their hands. Super common, right? Extremely common. I deal with it all the time. Not personally, but with my clients. And that is often coming from fascial adhesions in our pec muscles, the muscles in front of our chest by our shoulders, where compression starts to happen between the fascial layers. The nerves are disrupted because the nerves in the blood vessels to our arm runs under our pec, into our armpit, and down our hands. So when it's compressed and dehydrated, it just sticks and reduces. So I work with the fascial system from a whole perspective. So one thing that really changed my approach from being an RMT, a massage therapist, to a manual osteopath is, okay, so they're having pain in their wrist. As an RMT, I would have just done all the joint moves and worked all the muscles and done all the support. Now I'm thinking about the pathway of the artery, the pathway of the nerve. Often it's always coming back to treating the spine. The spine, with the exception of the 12 cranial nerves that come out of our skull, the spine has all of the nerves that come out. And if we have rotations and side bending, which we all do, again, it's kinking it. So over time, we have less innervation. We have less ability to move our body. And that results also in the less ability to recover. We're not having fluid exchange. We're having metabolites stay in tissues they shouldn't. Think about when your ankles are puffy, right? As particularly as we age, varicose veins, all of this is an inability for our system to return back. So definitely how I look at the body now from more of an osteopathic approach is from that perspective. If I get your shoulder back, your wrist is going to heal itself. Obviously, if you bang it and it's broken, that's a different case, but we're basically aligning you so blood's getting there, nervous innervation's getting there, and then I don't need to do anything. So for people who experience an osteopathic approach, it's often very simple feeling. What's happening? It's small, it's little adjustments. It's often very, well, typically it has no pain. Typically it's, you're not even sure something's happening. And then you leave and you're like, oh, okay, like there's this gush of blood. So it kind of is giving the power back to you, right?
So interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you have added this and it's so complementary to all that you have talked about, you know, the massage. And then now this, it sounds like it's very complementary as well.
It is. Sometimes clients will ask like, oh, is that an osteopathic approach? And I'm like, it's all one. I mean, it is actually one whole system. I don't see it as different. When I was doing osteo, I'm like, this just feels like I'm doing a master's program of massage.
Okay.
It's the same scope of practice. Like everything you're allowed to do as one, you're allowed to do as other. So it's very fluid. It is so complementary. It's just one knowledge base, right? I always say I strive to be a generalist. So many people, and I'm grateful they do, are specialists, right? Like get one area, we're doing one thing and we need those. But my kind of goal is, okay, let me get my fingers a little bit in all the pies. We know about nutrition and movement and sleep and hormones. And then if I need to refer you, I absolutely will, but at least I can have a little bit of understanding of how this is tying to this, or why issues with your liver is causing your right shoulder pain, which is an extremely common referral pattern. So then we have at least some kind of understanding, because we live in a society where our medical system is very parceled, which allows them to be extremely educated in that area. But you go to your doctor and they say, don't tell me about that, we're just talking about your tonsillitis. And it's like, okay, but yes, and. Well, it's yes, and.
Yes, and exactly. And when you first were talking about everything, that's kind of where my thoughts went, was that in Western medicine, it's very like one thing at a time.
Yeah.
We'll rule these things out, but the focus itself is still only on that one sort of piece.
Yeah.
In my experience with my back, I was really scared to go see somebody that I had seen in the past, not the person, but the type of work that was suggested. I was really scared because I've had not a great experience. But it wasn't they were educated in such a way into other things that then it was suggest, okay, let's do a little bit of this, and we're also going to do some of this, and we're going to connect this in there. And if I didn't have all these sort of like complementary generalized, like a generalized way of looking at it, I don't think I would have had as short of a recovery time as I did.
Yeah. So you felt like this practitioner was supportive from you for multiple layers of wellness.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes,
Powerful.
exactly. And it sounds like that's what you yourself have decided to do for your patients and people that come to you, is to be able to offer more than just one thing to help them overall and in general.
It's definitely my goal. And you know, when I was a young person and I was dealing with those injuries we spoke about earlier, I received a lot of help, and I found myself also feeling extremely alone in it. And when you're young too, people have the mindset of you're going to be fine, which is often true, of course. Like, of course, I was fine. And there was this whole experience of kind of being pushed under the rug, and no one was like really on my team, and no one really was like, I got you, we're going to figure this out. And so my journey as a practitioner has been really to be that. Now, I've had to do a lot of learning, and my therapist energy worker has been working with me a lot about also not being everybody's hero and being their teacher. So she's like, Madeleine, just to step out of your hero energy and into your teaching energy. And she said, yeah, right, because I found myself in some cases caring more than my clients cared about their health and the energy drain that creates. And now I realize, like, I am walking hand in hand with you up this hill, and I just can't be pulling you, right? I'm always going to be next to you. And that was really important for my development as a therapist, and what I really encourage in other people as well. Because
sorry, I have another question for that, because when you motion like the hand holding, but also explaining like not pulling, but you are there for them, have you found that like when a client really feels like you are just there to be alongside and to guide them versus pulling them, do you find that there's like a bit of a surrendering, and that they take that and then they're more willing to show up for themselves?
Absolutely. And it's even deeper with actually when I work with tissue systems. There'll be a tendency sometimes to push, and then it's like, no, allow, hold space for, right? Like, allow. And it's huge. Like, sometimes, you know, there'll be some really stuck fascia or something going on, and I'm engaged, and I'm pulling, and I'm encouraging, and it's like, ooh, okay, like, soften in my body, take a step back, like, leave space for this. Just like when you try to push your friend or your partner into something, there's resistance, right?
Yes.
Like, I know I had boyfriends, just want me to be a mountain biker so bad. And she's like, nah. When, you know, if that hadn't been held to that intensity, and I had been felt more invited versus pushed, I'm like, So yeah, I really see it in the tissue system and in just people's ability to feel neurologically safe. Over time, I've seen that that's what's most important on the treatment table. And all of us have different ways of getting there. And for some people, that's a more aggressive approach. And I've seen that do wonders as well. What I've discovered, what works for me and my clients, is the safety, again, in the neurological system, that then allows change to happen.
Yeah, definitely. I can attribute to that feeling of safety. And I think a lot of people feel shame when they're not doing the homework that they're supposed to do to recover, and then they're coming back to their appointment and they're being asked, how did your week go? Did you do your...
Yeah.
And I just remember, for even myself, it's like, when I finally trusted that I was in a safe place to show up the way that I was showing up, it was like I could just feel it in my body when I finally felt safe and could trust that I was going to be okay, and I was in good hands, and I wasn't going to be pulled up the hill. I was just going to be, they were just with me as well. Like, it was such a, yeah. So I can understand that that's an important piece for you as well, on the side of it, being the practitioner, as well as for the people that you are, the clients that you're working with as well.
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest misconception when it comes to, let's talk about the osteopathic industry?
Well, a lot of people don't know about the osteopathic industry, so I'm not sure how. I guess the biggest misconception, osteo, but like the actual word is bone, so people automatically think that I'm just going to be working with the bony system. So I guess that would be the biggest misconception. A lot of people hold the conception of no pain, no gain, which kind of ties into what we last said. And so I like to re-educate, again, around the neurological safety. Around, this is not about what you can withstand or not withstand. It's about not pushing the system to a point where you're guarded, right? So I just might, even just that little blurb of explanation helps people, because most of us think our therapist knows best, right? And like, okay, this is hard, they must know. And again, sometimes that's needed, and hopefully that's communicated in a way that this is going to be a little bit more of a tender area. We're still going to work within a threshold. So again, it's about getting yourself into an area of safety. And for so many people, it is about exploring not just what's happening in the physical realm. Often we're having some kind of internal process that's allowing that injury to remain for whatever purpose that is. That was my case with my tailbone break that didn't heal. It wasn't a soft tissue injury that was just taken forever. I had shit to deal with, and I had family stuff to deal with. And we always kind of have these secondary gains from having these pains, right? And whether or not that allows us to say no to things, right? Or maybe we need to change something in our life. But exploring what could be serving us about that pain or injury without judgment on ourselves, right? So yes, people like myself who are manual therapists are here to support your system, but taking the accountability for the emotional process there, and for most of us, the inflammatory process that's there. If our body's riddled with inflammation, like most of us are, and that's from diet, lack of sunlight, stress, so many things, our body's overloaded and we can't heal, even if we have the most amazing, knowledgeable therapist who knows how to put our body back, if inflammation keeps coming in. So yeah, I would say there's a misconception in that long-term chronic pain is an inability for our body to heal. And that's true, but it's not because often of tissue. It's a different pattern that's been created. It's deeper. It's deeper. But I will say just how healing an emotional pattern can heal the body Healing the body can heal the emotional pattern. They both work.
I feel like I could just talk forever, but I just wrote this post the other day, and it was like that whole like, is it the chicken or like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And like that, just as soon as you said that, it's just like that brought that up again. It's like you can do one thing and one thing only, but eventually it could be bring you to, that's the chicken, and then the egg piece, being the emotional side of things, and the thoughts and the patterns, and getting through all of that as well. I'm not at all explaining what my thoughts are properly right now, but it just, as soon as you said that, that's what came to my mind.
It's true, and I find it's often we don't need to know who came first.
Yes.
Right?
And that was
We need to support both the chicken and both the egg.
Yes, and that's exactly what I ended up writing as well. It's like, I didn't need the answer itself of what was first. I just needed to start taking some action in one direction or the other. And the knowledge that both are needed, I think, is something that often is missed. We think we are only going one route first. We just need to change our diet. That's first. Then once that happens, we'll be okay. But really, you need to change your diet or start something with that, as well as add in some other things. So that complements that, and circularly, it keeps you from going backwards. Yeah.
And that brings us back to that we all need each other, right?
Yes.
Because I'm educated in this area, someone else is educated in supporting your emotional patterns, and someone else is just your best friend who's gonna love you regardless, and someone, needs them all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What is your dream for this year?
Well, I have just included 2 new practitioners in the space, so I have dreamed to get them busy and to get them thriving. I am pretty committed to educating myself about both the concrete and the energetics of money. And I'd like to learn a lot more how to wield that and set myself up for that. I think as women, it's often, and I can't speak for all of us, but it's often an area that we don't always educate ourselves in. And I want to find some playfulness to that, because sometimes I don't even want to look at it.
Ooh, I love that.
And be like, okay, like there's this woman, Amanda Francis, who's all about the energy of money, and I listen to her stuff sometimes. It's like, okay, like let's pay every bill filled with gratitude, and let's like do things from this different stance instead of like, I have to pay my taxes or whatever it is. It's like, how lucky am I that I make X amount of money, that I get to pay this much taxes? Just changing my point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's an area that I've kind of pushed to the side. It's like, I'm just gonna do good work and like whatever.
Right.
And
well, allowing yourself to be guided by your heart, I feel like is something that I think if we don't do in the beginning, then we can end up not really being on the path that we're meant to be on, because we're guided by a different side of things, which is a more sort of financial construct of things, and making the funds versus actually being more heart-centered and following our paths. And then once you really feel like you're in that right place, it's like, okay, now I got to keep this going. I'm ready to like explore the other sort of side of it, and making sure that I can continue providing my energy and what I am passionate about.
yeah, exactly. I have a lot of desire to do more education. I'm not sure exactly what avenue that's going to come on, but in order for me to have the time and energy to provide education, I think it's going to be a YouTube channel, we'll see. I need to have things organized in such a way that I have time and resources to create things that maybe are not generating income or things like that. I'd love to build more energy around the studio. Again, we have women's circles here, and just like inviting more of that in, inviting more community in. That's kind of what I'm excited about this year. Like, how do we all rise? How do I use my resources in a way that feels abundant? I don't know, like a lot of people I've been hearing this year, instead of having resolutions, are doing this one word. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's like, okay, what's the word that you just want to invite this year instead of it being a goal? And I've decided that my word is abundance. And for me, that means my health, my community, my resources, my garden, but just abundance and just welcoming it in.
I love that. I love that so much. Is there anything else that has come up that you want to circle back to?
I would just encourage people to not be intimidated by needing help. I find a lot of people are, and they don't want to start because they think that they're going to be made fun of, or they think that it's too late, or they're too old, or they're too broken. And I just encourage people to humble themselves with a gentle first step and seek support, and support others, right? Like, I know sometimes when I'm in my darkest state, it's like, okay, good, get up and go help your friend, right? Like, I can generate energy for other people more often than I can for myself.
Right? And that's the shared energy piece, because that's exactly what comes to my mind as well. Sometimes, even if I'm not feeling like I can accept energy from other people because I'm in a dark place, I still allow myself to try to have a positive energy so that someone else can gain from me in that day. So it's like it's just like wanting to bring people up and help them rise up. And then from that, my energy and my mindset and everything just changes automatically.
Isn't it amazing how that works? It's like that Friends episode where they talk about there's no selfish good deeds. I mean, all good deeds are selfish. And they're trying to find one that's not, and you let yourself get bit by a wasp. And it's true, all good deeds benefit us. I mean, sometimes directly, sometimes through the ether, but just in our mood.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Not being afraid to be a beginner, help each other.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Anchor Your Dreams. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. A big thank you to our incredible guest for sharing their wisdom and insights. If you resonated with today's episode and want to explore more about turning your dreams into reality, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We have a lineup of amazing guests and valuable content coming your way. Don't forget to connect with us on social media. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook. Share your thoughts, insights, and your own journey using the hashtag #AnchorYourDreams. Head over to our website at meganmcquillan.com in the podcast section, where you'll find the show notes, resources, and information about upcoming episodes. Before we wrap up, I want to express my gratitude to each and every one of you. Your support means the world to me, and I'm thrilled to be on this journey with you. Remember, anchored dreams become goals. Anchored goals become results. Until next time, dream big and stay anchored.